The dose makes the poison.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 1 gram of carb in a day, you're not overloading yourself.
Yeah.
If you have 300, like the typical American and Canadian do, you're overloading yourself. Your body is trying to keep you alive. And in order to keep you alive, it's going to get those carbohydrates out of your blood. And where will it put them?
Yeah.
It's going to put them away as fat. So to say that a calorie is a calorie, absolutely not. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mind Blowing Health and Wellness with Violet, Pat Chat Edition. I'm Violet.
And I'm Pat.
We make these videos to help everyone to understand how the keto diet works, how low carb works, basically how to be healthy while keeping your carbohydrates low. Patrick finds interesting articles and podcasts and information on the internet. We discuss it to make sure that you guys have the best information and you can kind of tell when stuff isn't good. So what do we have today?
Actually, today I think we have good stuff. So Insider released an article not so long ago. 10 diet myths overturned in the past decade, from fat makes you fat to supplements are harmless. So first myth that we actually discovered was not true in the last decade: eating fat makes you fat.
Okay, obviously.
So
okay, that's a simple one.
But maybe you can just explain it,
okay, so
your view on that for the viewers.
Okay, so why eating fat doesn't make you fat? Well, okay, so you know what? Back up.
Right.
Eating excessive amounts of fat will still make you fat. That first myth is a myth because when you eat any of the macronutrients, and I'm calling sugar a macronutrient under duress, when you eat any of the macronutrients, your body has a reaction. So when you eat sugar, your body has the maximum insulin reaction. When you eat fat, it has the minimum insulin reaction, and the protein reaction is right in the middle. So the reason that eating fat causing you fat is a myth is because that insulin reaction is what tells your body to start storing things away as fat. So actually, eating sugar
makes you fat
is the thing that causes the majority of us to be overweight. Like I said, if you overeat any of the macronutrients, you will gain weight. But if you eat sugar, it's much more likely to happen. And then what happens is when you eat sugar and your body starts storing, everything else you eat gets stored. So if you have too much sugar and then you still have your protein and your fat, it all gets put away. But yes, it's
so
if you have, if you were to have just a tablespoon of sugar versus a tablespoon of butter, it's the tablespoon of sugar that's going to cause you to gain the most weight.
Yeah. So words of advice / warning: everything that's light, like light Caesar dressing, light,
Diet foods.
Avoid, diet food, because they tend to be higher in sugar, and these are the ones that will actually make you fat.
So basically, what he's talking about is the fact that in our sphere of fat, we took fat out of everything, and by taking the fat out, we added sugar to get flavor because it tasted poor without fat, and then of course now those diet foods actually help us to gain weight.
Still, the quality of fat is important.
Yeah.
So don't start drinking your vegetable oil by the gallon.
Okay, so that's the other part of it. As I said, the fat intake has the lowest insulin rise and protein, right? If you make sure that your primary source of fat is the fat that comes along with your meat, you should be fine, right? So the fat that comes along with your protein source, it doesn't have to necessarily be meat because olives have protein as well. So it depends on what you're doing. But I think the thing is just to keep it in mind, nuts have fat as well. So it's just a matter of making sure that you're getting your fat from whole foods, not processed oils that are dangerous chemicals that will harm you.
Totally. Another myth: diets or detoxes are the best way to lose weight. So
diets
we used
or
to
detoxes
so
are the best
we
ways
used to
to
think
lose
that for example, juice cleanses, fat diets, like the yo-yo thing. I'm just gonna eat grapefruit for a month, to detox and stuff. So that used to be a thing in the past decade.
So here's the thing. What I will say about that is, first of all, cleanses, of course, is not a good way to lose weight. A cleanse, just even as the word is, a cleanse is supposed to be about cleaning out your system, not about losing weight. So that's the first part of that story. But diets as a way to lose weight, and when we use that word diet to mean specifically trying to lose weight in a short period of time, that's horrible. Don't do that, ever. What you should be doing is, if you notice that the way that you're eating is causing weight gain, then you should be changing your diet, meaning lifestyle, for a forever thing that you can maintain forever, right? So if you're dieting and then not dieting, and that's yo-yo dieting, and it's horrible.
So, okay. So research has like you said, research has consistently found that extreme, quick fix diet plans don't work and aren't good for your health long term. Why I want to point like this out is that keto is not a quick fix. It's not a temporary diet. Like some articles can like.
Well,
lead
people
you
think
to
keto is a diet
think,
because it's called the keto diet. But so is the standard American diet called the standard American diet, right? And you don't eat the standard American diet for a month. You eat it like most people eat it most of their life. So we need to understand that word diet has two meanings. When you use it behind the name of a diet, it means really what they're trying to say is lifestyle, right? Like, and I always encourage people to think about keto as a lifestyle because that's what it is meant to become if you're going to be healthy long term.
Yeah. So your primary goal with keto should be healthy. Then like I want to lose 10 pounds.
But the thing is, you don't even have to do and I want to lose 10 pounds because if you are healthy, your weight will regulate itself because you're not going to have extra inflammation, so no extra water. You're not going to be eating things that you don't need because honestly, our body, if we're not in a state of addiction, tends to get satisfied and then we don't overeat. And it's like, I know it's such a hard thing to imagine because we're so used to overeating on the standard Canadian, standard American diet. But it's weirdly interesting how when you eat healthy, you're not constantly eating. Okay. You agree?
Yeah. Another one, grazing or eating small meals frequently is the LTS eating pattern. So what are
as I just said,
those who promote like eating 6, 7, like the breakfast, the morning snack, the lunch, the afternoon snack, the supper, and the snacking before going to bed. So this is actually the worst thing that you can do.
Well, okay. So as I said earlier, when you eat, your body has a reaction to those macronutrients of an insulin spike. It's when you eat. So it doesn't even matter which one you eat. Even if you were to say you're having fat at each of those moments, your body's still having an insulin response, which means that there's still insulin floating around in your body, and insulin has an effect. So the thing is that what are we trying to do, especially if you have weight to lose? You're trying to make sure that you have insulin responses the least number of times that you can, because for most people who are overweight, your body is so sensitive to sugar that even if you have a small amount, your body has a huge reaction. So it really does become important to make sure that you eat the minimum, like the least number of times a day that you can.
Another myth: breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Like if
I agree with that statement, so like let's just say even if I agree with that statement, what makes us believe that breakfast has to happen in the morning? Yeah, I break my fast usually around 7 and 8 o'clock at night.
But breakfast, as we like all.
Again, that's us deciding that breakfast means morning. There's nothing in breakfast that means morning. Breakfast just means the first time you've eaten for the day.
Yeah, sure. So should you eat between 7 and 8 in the morning, or between 6 and 8 in the morning?
I just said I break my fast at 7 or 8 at night. I'm not special. I really am. I'm not. Yeah.
And the more you move through, if it's what you want through the intermittent fasting path, like the easiest to skip is like that breakfast in the morning. So. Yeah.
Well, the other part of the story that's kind of crazy is that most people for breakfast have what?
Cereal.
Carbs.
And carbs, stuff that's going to spike your...
Like a bunch of carbs, whether it's a bowl of cereal, a bowl of fruit. Okay, some people have bacon and eggs, but then they'll have bread with it. It's like most people have some kind of carby something in the morning, and then they're on that train of I need carbs, I need carbs, I need carbs all day long. So...
But I already told that as a joke. Like, I think the breakfast is to like open your appetite for the lunch, and then it's open.
You forgot the snack.
And the
breakfast, snack, and lunch, snack, dinner, snack, bed, repeat.
So nobody will die like if they skip like their breakfast between 6 and 8.
But I also do think that So here's the thing. I do believe that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Probably did start off as important because there was knowledge that whatever you're eating, that first thing that you eat should be quality. The problem is we use it in the kind of perverted way where we say you have to eat. No, it's about whatever that first thing is you eat should be quality. From my perspective, whatever that first thing you eat, you should try to make sure there's no carbs in it. That first meal should be a protein fat / meal with the minimum amount of carbs in it, so that you can have your day move forward without cravings.
Yeah. Another myth: a calorie is a calorie. Are we still here like eat less, move more? Calories a calorie. You need to come down to 1,500 if you want to lose weight or something like that.
I find it really interesting, and that's always been an argument that they've said a calorie is a calorie. But I really do think, and this is where you hear of a lot of people that are doing lifestyles that sound healthy, but then when you talk to them about what they're eating is pasta, like macaroni and cheese, and cookies and chips, and there's no fat in there from an animal, but there's still fat in there, and there's still high carb, and it's mostly processed stuff. And so you have to ask yourself, if I'm building a body, do I want to build it with whole foods that's going to give me the best possible quality structures, or do I want to use processed foods? And I feel like this is where we get confused, because when we say a calorie is a calorie, it means that I can't eat cookies all the time.
2,000 calories of cookies.
I can eat, I can eat 2,000 calories of cookies. I can eat ice cream for supper, which I actually know somebody who was doing that, that would not eat all day so they could just eat ice cream for supper. And when you looked at that person's fingernails, wow. And it's just like, that's not healthy.
No, that's not healthy.
We need to really just be careful with what we're doing, take care of ourselves properly, right?
So no, 2,000 calories of carbs is not equivalent of 2,000 calories of fat, because the carbs is going to spike way higher, like your insulin, you're going to store more. So even if it's 2,000 calories, you'll end up like way fatter with your 2,000 calories of carbs than your 2,000 calories of fat.
Absolutely.
And in the end, you want to still have a balanced
one of the things that we need to understand is that carbohydrates floating around the blood above 5 grams, toxic, right? The poison, so the dose makes the poison, that's part of that idea, right? The dose makes the poison. If you have 1 gram of carb in a day, you're not overloading yourself. If you have 300, like the typical American and Canadian do, you're overloading yourself. So, you have to be careful about what you're doing. Your body is trying to keep you alive. And in order to keep you alive, it's going to get those carbohydrates out of your blood. And where will it put them? It's going to put them away as fat. So to say that a calorie is a calorie, absolutely not.
And also want to add that 2,000 calories of fruit, not healthy either.
No.
Not healthy either.
Because fruit is sugar.
It's sugar, and it's processed with by your liver. And
so this is the other thing that actually, just to put that in perspective, well, you need to consider that if I eat 200 calories worth of chocolate bar or 200 calories worth of fruit, besides the fiber that you're getting, your body still has to process all that sugar, right? And I'll even go more specific. If I eat 20 grams of carbs of chocolate bar and 20 grams of carbs of fruit, to my body, it's the same. It's struggling to put that sugar away, right? That's what we need to understand. Is when you take that fiber out of the story, it's sugar versus sugar. Be careful.
And you're talking chocolate, not the nice 90% chocolate.
But even if it's a 90% chocolate, if it's 20, but even if it's 20, I said
20
5 grams. I said 20 grams of carbs of it.
As
soon as you hit that 20 grams of carbs of it, your body is doing the same thing with both.
It's true. Okay, another what about BMI is an accurate marker of health? We still use BMI,
people use BMI, but the thing is that when you are outside the norm, it becomes really hard, right? Because your BMI, for example, if you are a very muscular woman, let's say you do weightlifting and stuff like that, your BMI is going to look wrong. And if you're a very I guess thin man would also have it be wrong.
Mhm.
So like it's really hard because there's a gender piece of the puzzle,
Yeah.
and what about like BMI? I'm not really sure takes into consideration water retention and all these other things. The best thing to do is to that waist to height
Height
ratio. That's the thing that's going to really help you to understand if your health is where it needs to be.
And it should be half, right?
It should be 50% or less,
Yeah.
right? And if you, yeah, so the BMI, it's tough. Like I know that that's something that they were saying for the longest while.
Yeah. What about vegetarian food is always healthier?
Well, vegetarian food, well, it depends on the fat source. Might be good, might not be good, depending on how it was made. So if it's processed fats, no.
Yeah.
Then like processed fats is just ruining any food. But if it's with good fats, the problem is that it's such a high amount of carb, and the protein source is not necessarily going to have all the leucine that you need. So you have to be really careful with leucine if you're doing a vegetarian lifestyle. And even at that, I would say that the conversion rates for all the omega-3s and all the fats that you would normally get from animal sources, you're going to have a really hard time getting them. There's a lot of there's also some vitamins that you need to get from animal sources. So there's stuff that you need to get from animal sources that you're going to have a hard time getting from a vegetarian lifestyle. So on that one, I'd have to say no.
In that case, maybe like the flexitarian that we talked about, like.
But that's not vegetarian.
That's not vegetarian, yeah, but like you still have. But like, yeah, so not the best. Probably, and I think you've talked about that in the past. There's a bunch of studies that like are appearing that like go against
Vegetarian?
Vegetarian, yeah.
Well, just
diets.
because there's animal
You still
proteins and there are certain animal proteins that we cannot produce ourselves that we need to get from animals, and there's certain animal fats that we cannot produce ourselves that we need to get from animals. And we need to understand that our body is made of cells. So those fats become super important. If you're not eating them, then your body will start using the other fats that you're eating that are not the same to build cells. And now we're talking cancer situations. Now we're talking deformed cells. Now you're actually producing problems in your body if you don't have the correct building materials.
Everyone should take vitamin supplements. Like vitamin C, vitamin D, E, the multivitamins. Like this, a big industry.
So I'm laughing here because I actually do believe that there's a vitamin that everybody should take, vitamin D.
Oh, there's one, yeah.
But do I think so vitamin D we get from the sun. Like for example, I live in Montreal, and in Montreal,
yeah, during winter.
well, not even during winter, even in the summer, we're not close enough to the equator to get the amount of vitamin D that we actually need. So even in the summer, although I'll be honest with you, in the summer I don't take it, but come the fall through till spring, I take it because you need it. It's important. And you know what? Vitamin D actually helps with mood. So if you're depressed and you're living in a climate where you don't get enough vitamin D, you might be surprised to find out that taking vitamin D could solve the problem. I've had a lot of people that do, shift work, that started taking vitamin D and their mood dramatically improved. And I've also had some clients of mine that were truck drivers. So they're doing long distance driving, which means they're like driving overnight as well sometimes. And like, so they're not getting the daytime because they're sleeping during the day because that's when the truck is being filled up and then they're driving. So they were like in these off hours, and guess what? Taking the vitamin D, mood came back. So
is it a must for everyone?
Vitamin D3, by the way.
Yeah. But is it a must for everyone?
If you live near the equator, no.
No.
But if you don't need to live near the equator, but all the other vitamins, it really depends on how you're eating.
Yeah.
So if you're eating nose to tail, or if you're eating, a good mix of meats and veg, there's a possibility that you wouldn't need to take vitamins. The other issue with vitamins is that a lot of the time, the form of the vitamin isn't actually the form that we're able to use. And so you're kind of paying for something that's not actually doing what it's supposed to do. Good examples of this is calcium. Sometimes we're not getting the right form, and I don't remember which one is which, not a doctor. But I do remember that D2 is not the right form of vitamin D for people. We need D3. There's others examples of that doctors have talked about vitamins and being careful, because basically you're going to eliminate them
But
if
you
they're
have a
not
good,
used.
if you have a good variety of food in your diet, so nuts, seed, like vegetables, salads, meats, shouldn't be, maybe except for the D, like shouldn't be an issue. You don't need
Yeah,
vitamin
it
C.
shouldn't. It shouldn't
Yeah.
be. Although, like I said, it's
Mm,
you really do need to have that varied
yeah.
food,
Okay.
or nose to tail. If I personally, for medical reasons, can't eat nose to tail because some things have too much iron for me.
Mm,
So I do sometimes supplement certain. Like I said, I do the D3. I do cod liver oil. I do little things just to make sure.
mm,
But
yeah.
if you're eating
Personal.
if you can eat nose to tail, you shouldn't have a problem.
Okay. What about artificial sweeteners that are better for you than regular sugar?
So they're not.
They're
Artificial
not.
sweeteners are poisons. I mean, like, let's call a spade a spade. They're chemicals that we've created that didn't exist in nature. And
Mm,
so, therefore, our body doesn't know what to do with them. They're poisons. We shouldn't be eating them.
yeah.
Like, that's just period. Now, there are sugar alcohols, which do exist in nature. Those ones are not as bad, but still not advisable.
Mm.
Um,
And they still can spike your insulin,
yes.
right? So
I,
be
the,
careful with that.
Yeah, if you want to have
So,
anything to sweeten, although we go back to if you're doing keto and you're, like really
mhm,
you're probably not going to need to sweeten things anymore.
yeah.
But in that transition period, if you do need to sweeten, because I do understand some people need a transition period, stevia
Yeah.
is the way to go. Now, the cool thing about stevia is that you won't use a lot because if you use too much, it becomes bitter. So it's going to be just enough to make it sweet enough to eat or drink whatever you're eating or
Yeah.
drinking, but not enough for you to be still chasing sugar, which
Yeah.
is actually a nice reason
Yeah.
to use it.
But in the end, like if you're serious about your journey, you're not gonna like seek that sugary taste. Like I know I'm just saying because like I remember when I started keto, I've bought all those
Yeah.
coconut flour and almond flour and stevia and sweeteners, and they're still all in my cupboard
Yeah.
because just like you said in a past video, I think I've become too lazy to bake them and to make cakes, and like since I'm not into that anymore, so I'd rather have my
Like I said,
little
I
full fat
feel
yogurt.
I do feel like for some people it might be a transition
Mm,
way of
yeah.
getting from one spark to the next. But the reason that I like stevia is because you really do have to use less of it
Yeah.
to get a little bit of sweet. But like if you go try to get too much sweet, it becomes bitter. So it really it kind of teaches you to like just be moderate in what you're doing. Is gonna give that little bit of sweetness. It's gonna help you to transition, and eventually you'll notice you don't need to put it anymore.
Mm.
So like that's my reasoning behind it. But yeah, I think I do agree with you that at some point, most people who are adhering to, trying to eat whole foods, stop chasing those things because you just get tired of either baking all the time. And, this is where like these keto stores that are popping up around, there's one near us where you can go and buy like treats and whatever. For some people can be a godsend, and for other people can be the devil,
Yeah.
right? Because if you don't have to bake anymore and you're willing to pay the prices of those things, all of a sudden you've got access, right?
Mhm.
Now, again, everyone has to choose what they're going to do. I'm not going to say it's bad. I'm not going to say it's good. It's there. It's available. I want people to think about it as a transition. I want people to think about it as a treat,
Mhm.
right? The same way that, we look at fruit as a treat.
Yeah.
Like, so same way that we look at alcohol as a treat, right?
Mhm.
Like it shouldn't be a daily occurrence. It shouldn't be something that you have to have.
Next one, more protein is always better.
Well, no,
So-
your protein is a pivot.
Yeah.
The way that you calculate how much protein you need is by the amount of body, like muscle that you have, right? Is you're trying to support your muscles. And I can't remember what the number is. I think it's between 0.8 and 1.2 or something like that. That you the
0.5 to
calculation.
0.5 to 0.7 grams per pound of body weight.
Okay, so
For sedentary people, a little bit more for athletes. Yeah.
So I mean, I've heard the number like up
Yeah.
to 1.2. So like, but whatever it is, it's like there's a number. Now the truth is, when you were eating the standard American, standard Canadian diet, as long as you weren't overeating your protein, you should turn around and be eating the same amount.
Yeah.
And guess what? If you were overeating your protein, when you do keto, you're going to figure that out because eventually you won't be able to finish it. That's what's going to happen. There's a certain amount of food that your body's going to want. And when you're satiated, so not full, but when you're satiated, if you allow yourself to stop eating at that point, you'll notice, hey, that's how much meat I eat now.
Yeah.
And then you'll start making that much, right? So I hope so, to not be wasteful. You'll start making that much. So we, this whole idea of eating 12-ounce steaks and 20-ounce steaks and all this stuff. And it's like, honestly, like I've said it a bunch of times, I'm about 7 ounces of meat around. Before doing keto, it was like a chicken leg, like the thigh and the drumstick. And that's what I eat when I do have. Yeah. It hasn't changed, right? If I'm eating ground beef, it's about 7 ounces. If I'm eating a sausage, it's about 7 ounces. Like, it is what it is. So those were the myths. So I mean,
were debunked in the last decade.
So okay, so I mean, I don't think there was anything there that was surprising.
No, yeah.
Interestingly enough, so nice article to end on.
It's interesting that like at least we're getting awareness that these are like actually were messages that we used to hear all the time that are not true, and actually now we know they're not true. So
I don't know if we used to hear them all the time, like going far back. I think we've heard them in our lifetime. I don't think our parents heard this stuff.
No, in our lifetime. Right?
Yeah, I think it's
like with the standard American diet. Trend of the maybe the 70s and above.
Which is kind of interesting. Again, like it's nice to see these things be changed and that we're actually able to eat a healthier lifestyle and take care of ourselves better, right? Make sure that we're fueling ourselves efficiently and carefully, and
with good food.
With good food, with whole foods. It's like I can't stress that enough that we need to eat whole foods. So that's great. I want to thank you for watching Mind Blowing Health and Wellness with Violet, Pat Chat Edition. If you want to contribute to the production of videos, Amazon links, Patreon links in the description below. Love making these videos for you guys. Happy when my wellness warriors are back. And if you're new, please subscribe. Talk to you next week.
See you next week.